Hi, everyone. Welcome to OK Mom. I'm Lissa Fraser Kerr, and I just sit here and look at and chat with my daughter, Vanessa Fraser. So, hi, everyone, and welcome, Vanessa.
Hello. How are
Okay,
you?
I'm okay, except your closet door's open, and I'm looking at you on Skype, and there's this little part of me that's going, I can't handle that door open.
I know, but it's stuck. It doesn't close anymore.
Okay, I'm just gonna have to like block out that part of your screen if you don't mind. Okay, hi.
Hello.
How
How
was
was your
your
week?
week? No, no, no.
No,
I asked first. No, me,
no,
me, you, you,
your
you.
week.
No,
No,
you.
you go. Please. After
I don't
you.
remember. I think it was good. It
That
was a
was
good
my
week.
answer.
No, I blocked it out. I had a great week, I think. My husband, your stepdad, came home finally from the North Country, and he
From
looked a
getting milk.
little. He finally showed 3 weeks later, um, looking like a very shaggy beast. And it was really funny because I was making the bed in the morning and there were little twigs and things stuck on
Oh
the pillow.
no.
And I think I showed them to to Jay, and he said, "Yeah, it's time for a haircut." So he spent most of the day yesterday shaving off a pound of hair. Like he had a bag full of the short black hair, mostly gray, but don't tell him that. And it took him forever. It was like shave and then keep shaving and then keep shaving and keep shaving. And it's this battery powered thing. And it took 16 to 18 hours to charge. And I said, it better last the whole haircut because you're going to be at this for a while. And I took some video of him, and he was getting a little self-conscious, but his whole body was covered in hair. The whole bathroom was covered in these little short black hairs and gray. And he spent half the day cutting his hair, and the other half of the day vacuuming out the bathroom.
Oh
And now
my God.
he's completely bald. Like he gave himself like a zero. So it's sandpaper, and I just love the way it feels, but it's like sandpaper. So he doesn't look like our hot Regé Jean. He looks like a hotter version of Jay.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
can like Bridgerton again, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, he's not like Bridgerton because Bridgerton guy, Regé Jean, he has lots of hair, and Jay did, but way too much, and now he looks like Jay again.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
yeah, people won't be stopping him on the street for autographs anymore.
Well, that sucks for him.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mhm.
I told him, I said, I've seen you in your underwear. You ain't no Regé Jean. No, I didn't say
Oh my
that.
gosh. Okay.
Sorry, Jay.
Let's lay down some ground rules. Number one, no talking about my stepdad's junk. That's it. That's the only
That's
rule.
the only rule.
No, no
I
more rules. I'm laying a boundary, a very healthy boundary. Yeah, I don't want to go there.
okay. So I thought we could also talk about the Department of Corrections and put it under a section called brain farts. And there's a few things that we've spoken about and forgotten totally. Okay, we meaning me, totally forgot what the words were and the movie titles and all that stuff. So I'm going to start with episode 1 and say Mike Myers was in Austin Powers. That's where Faja came from, and that's where Mimaji came from. Okay. Then there was another one where we talked about Generation X, and we mentioned the bust. Generation X is the bust. That's J. Jessica. And you are in Gen Y or Millennial, and you are the echo of the boomer. You're the progeny. You came from a boomer. So
Mhm.
the other thing I want to say is lime cordial, lime cordial, lime cordial, lime cordial. No lemon, no lemon. Don't put
No
lemon in the
lemon
gin.
anywhere.
No, 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 no. Tonic water and a slice of lime, but no lemon. Okay, I'm done. That's our Department of Brain Farts. Corrections.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should have a sound effect for that. Dun dun dun.
Brain fart, fart, fart. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that
we'll
was
use that.
I am 12. Okay, so we didn't get to your week. Tell me about your.
I don't remember most of my week. I went to HomeSense. Which, if you can see right here, those of you at home cannot see, but I got a uh, fake gold-plated hand doing the A-OK. Because I feel like that sums up my time between the last HomeSense trip and this HomeSense trip. Everything is just A-OK.
Not great.
So
Not good.
it's
Just okay.
yeah, it's mediocre at best. And it's in my office to remind me to have a baseline of mediocre at best.
Okay. So why is it up on the shelf, like 7 feet in the air?
Oh, we're going to have to pause one moment.
Aw.
We have a sad 1.5-year-old going for a night-night.
We talked about her sleep regression.
Mm-hmm.
And is that still happening?
Not as much. It happens. It's winding down, which is nice. However, we record these on Sundays, and you guys listen to these on Wednesday. So today is the lovely time change where we spring forward. So it is morning time, and this time on a normal day would be time for bed. But it is actually an behind. So it is actually an hour early for bed. So I'm not sure how this is going to go.
Okay.
Hopefully well. I'm really dreading tonight and every night for the next week until we adjust this, because we go to bed with the sun, and I don't know how to explain to a 3-year-old that the sun is still up and she is not. So this is going to be an adjustment for all of us. It's going to be really interesting to any moms with littles out there. I hope you have lots of coffee and wine this week, and Godspeed. That's all I can say.
Oh, I want to squeeze them and give them hugs.
I know.
And you too, but the kids first.
Yeah, I know. The second I got pregnant, it was me second for everyone, not just for me. Which is actually really interesting, because I wanted to talk about today how being a mother changes you. Does it change you? How does it change you? So I wanted to ask you, Miss Lissa, because we have very different visions of our lives from when we were younger and what we wanted out of life. I knew very early on that I wanted to be a mother. I knew I wanted to have a whole buttload of kids. I wanted a posse, a baseball team, a Von Trapp-like situation. Where did you stand when you were younger on wanting children?
I would say polar opposite enough that I don't know who you are and how you became my daughter. All my friends from childhood married what I would consider quite young. And they just found their person really early, and whether they married or just dated for most of their early 20s, they were together. They were like locked into their relationships. And one friend had married when I was in first year college and then had her first baby when I just graduated. And I mean, that was 20 years old, and I couldn't even understand that. I was so happy, but like for them, but I just wasn't in my brain ready for anything like that. I was like career forward, career first. And I didn't know if I had the mom gene. I honestly didn't think that I was ever prepared for a little baby. I met your dad and he had a 4-year-old. So she was really cute and already formed and trained, and she was just a sidekick. She was more like a fun, I didn't feel like her parents. So it was more like an aunt or, a family friend or whatever. I didn't feel like I had a right to discipline her or raise her, but I tried to guide her and be like, a camp counselor.
Mm-hmm.
So I could handle that, but I wasn't thinking in terms of little babies. I think that didn't even occur to me until I was in my 20s and sorry, late 20s. And even then I was like, it's something you're supposed to do. It's not something I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I was like had a desire to have a large family. It was like, I think I could try this once.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I mean, it was
Sorry,
a
Daniel.
no, it was a bonus because it was you. But at the time, I wasn't raised with little babies around. I babysat, but I didn't have that compulsion. It wasn't like I have to recreate. It was like I think I was too neurotic and too unstable. I didn't think in terms of like not unstable mentally, but in my life, I wasn't sure
Mm-hmm.
where I was going to end up. There was always something else I was looking toward. I wasn't content in the place I was at in my life in those days.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's kind of where you were at before having kids and the like mentality that you had. I feel like I was also in the unstable phase of life. And we're kind of starting in the same place, although you don't necessarily feel the desire to have children. I'm like, yes, I'm ready. If it happens, it happens. Let's do this. So, when you first got pregnant, what was that like for you?
Well, it was intentional at that time. I felt like, okay, I'm married. Let's go. Like 100% ready. Like it was I've described my life at that time as kind of like a fairy tale. Like everything happened very uh, quickly. You know, I met
Mhm.
your dad, then we dated, then we lived together. We lived in a really cool old farmhouse, a stone farmhouse. Then we bought our own house together, and then we fixed the house up. Then we got married at the house, and then it was like, okay, now I'm going to get pregnant.
Mhm.
Then 3 years later, it was like I woke up and went, what the heck have I done? So
Okay, well,
anyway,
we're jumping
other
too far
story.
ahead.
Yeah.
So, but what changes? Because here's my thing when it comes to pregnancy is as someone who has always wanted children, I found it incredibly difficult and hard. And I think that the what's projected out there is that you're supposed to feel like a barefoot Contessa. You're supposed to feel like this magical, miraculous thing is happening with your body. And it's the miracle of life. And you should have flowers in your hair at all times, always be near a meadow or a cornfield, taking bump photos and just with the sunset glowing behind you. And in reality, what a lot of people don't talk about is that it sucks. It really sucks because there's a lot of changes that happen. There's a lot of things that people don't warn you about. There's a lot of fear and anxiety because anything could happen at any time. And I do want to put a disclaimer out there because there's also this idea that if you aren't feeling that way, that you're not grateful enough. Because there are people who struggle with fertility, there are people who want to be in that position and they can't be. So, anytime someone is not acting grateful enough, sometimes there's a lot of flack for that or a lot of backlash because people would they're like they want to be in that situation so badly. So how could you take that for granted? And I want to say that we both enjoy our children, I think. I think you enjoy me.
Oh, I'm loving
Um
you.
and we're both grateful for being parents. So that I don't want this to come across as like we're not I don't know the right words to say for this. I don't want it to come across that we're not grateful.
No, and I hear what you're saying because I think that is more of a fact that you hear about more than when I was pregnant. You didn't hear a lot about women who couldn't get pregnant. The fertility situation wasn't what it is, like the medicine wasn't in the
Mhm.
state that it's in now. So there's more hope. But physiologically, and psychologically you change during pregnancy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, focusing on that, which of course triggers emotions and feelings, and um, just your hormones are going through a flip flop for, part of it. And you can get really sick. And,
Mm-hmm.
those are, I think it's okay to talk about that because I think that is the reality of pregnancy. I don't think it's about saying, I'm in a better place because I'm pregnant. It's not like that. I'm saying if we focus on the physiological and psychological changes, then we're talking about it in almost a, not medical, but a more term in,
Factual.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, more of a
Yeah.
factual way. These are facts. These are things that happen. And I mean, currently we're going through, what did you say that they were going to call it? Generation C for COVID?
Yes.
That there's so many celebrity babies being born at any time. There's so many people getting pregnant throughout all of these lockdowns in the last year. There's so many pandemic babies that
Oh, sorry. Pet peeve, pandemic. Sorry, got to throw that in there.
I don't care. I'm calling Pamela babies. Panorama babies.
Okay, better.
That I genuinely think that it's worth it to put something out there talking about the real facts of it, because being pregnant does change you. It changes you in ways I never even anticipated. And there are so many medical things that happened through being pregnant. And that's not even with the baby being born and the motherhood changes. Like, it is a wild ride that people don't really warn you about with
Hmm.
things like that. Like, there's the jokes about cravings and weird food that people are eating and what that means for the sex of the baby and all these other things. But there's like morning sickness. I didn't have that, but one of my best friends did and had to be medicated because it was so bad. Like,
Hmm.
she said, she described it as though she was on a boat all the time. And hers went well into the second trimester. And they tell you once you're in the second trimester, it's done. And sometimes it's not.
No, no. I mean, there's the textbook pregnancy, and then there's everybody in the world, or every
Hmm.
woman in the world, let's say, at this point, um, that will experience things in a different way. But they try to find the median, where this is what you could expect. Like, what to expect when
Hmm.
you're expecting. So it's trying to normalize some of the extremes that you might feel, as opposed
Hmm.
to what is being written in the book. And everybody will experience pregnancy differently, even in your own pregnancies. Like,
Hmm.
they're not textbook, but yet they are natural, and there's a baby in the end usually. So that's why they try to keep it at this level, because there's always going to be the extremes and variations on the theme.
Hmm. And the one thing that I would like to say is that if you don't like your OBGYN that you are dealing with throughout your pregnancy, you are allowed to change who you're seeing. Like, that's one
Really
thing.
though?
Yeah, a hundred
Well,
percent. Because there's a lot of people who don't feel heard, that have a lot of fear. And you need to have a good match with your doctor that's caring for you while you're pregnant, because you need someone who's going to hear you and reassure you. I mean, my OBGYN, the very first time, I was in Timmins, which is a really small town, and she was amazing. She was great. She was very quick in her appointments, but she would give you the floor if you had any fears of anything. She would kind of prepare you for what was coming in the next few weeks. And I was in a really interesting situation because I didn't have a family doctor. I had just moved there, I don't know, a couple months before. And so I saw an OB from the very beginning, which you usually don't see until later on. So a lot of my issues were caught pretty early on, because she was on it, and she was like, well, we could do this then, but let's do this now because you're here. And she found it really interesting because she had never followed a pregnancy right from the beginning to
Wow.
the end. Yeah, because
Wow.
usually she sees people at like 26 weeks, right? So they're already halfway through. So for her, it was really interesting. And then on top of that, she went on vacation the day that I went into labor. So she saw me right up until the very end and never actually saw Cameron. So that's really funny. But so the changes.
Well,
So one
let's
of
back it up because I also wasn't aware you were pregnant until you announced it, and I was not expecting what I heard.
for clarification, I announced it to you well before everyone else. You didn't find out publicly
Right? No,
at
no,
the
I
same
didn't.
time.
No, but
When
I
you say announce it, it sounds like I waited until it was on Facebook and then was like, "Oh, hey mom."
No, no, you were good. You were good that way, but it was a shock. I mean, I was like, what? What?
Yes, number 1 was a surprise baby. A great surprise, but a surprise.
Mhm. I don't believe in that.
And
I don't believe there are surprises.
okay.
You did it, so you know that there's a good chance. So
Well,
it's
there's
not
a
really a
chance.
surprise.
But okay, let's not get into
It's
the
very
nitty grits.
preventable.
So I told you by putting bottle,
Okay,
and
wait.
I
You
still
cut out
have the
there. Can you
video.
say that again?
I told you by putting it on a wine bottle
Yep.
and said that you're gonna be an actual mimage. And then I went to a private ultrasound place because they wouldn't take me until further along. But I had read online that there was a heartbeat and that you'd be able to see it. So you and I went to a private ultrasound place and you were actually the first one to see her
Hmm.
before we even knew she was a she or
Hmm.
anything about anything.
Hmm. She was a peanut.
Yeah. She was tiny with this like loud thumping heart. It was really cool. Um, but in those early stages, I didn't really have any symptoms, and that actually worried me because I wasn't seeing any changes. And first little while before they start kicking, I don't think you even start to feel the kicks until about almost halfway through.
Hmm.
So there's really no assurance or anything that everything's okay, and you just have to wait for ultrasound to ultrasound, which can be
You're
really
really
nerve.
fading in there. You have to restate that. It went whoa, 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 whoa.
I don't know what's going on because you're getting really like when you talk, it's going meow too.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Okay. I forget what I said. I
You're
don't even
talking
know.
about you didn't have any assurances that everything was normal because you couldn't get the ultrasound until you
Right.
were further along.
Okay. Yeah. So for the first, I would say 3 months, I didn't really have any symptoms. There weren't any changes going on. There wasn't any signs that everything was okay. And I mean, they don't start moving in there until almost halfway through your pregnancy. So there's no reassurance. And that fear was a huge change that I didn't anticipate, especially because there's something to be said with when you're not intentionally getting pregnant, but you feel that connection with them. Like I felt that connection with her the second those two lines showed up. And I was like, all right, we're doing this. This is it. Like I got you, girl. It's me and you. We're doing this. And instantly I was so attached to the pregnancy and to the baby. And I never anticipated that, especially when you hear about people who suffer losses and things like that. A lot of the feedback is like, well, it was only 6 weeks. But for the 2 weeks that you know about it, you're already making plans in your head. You're already thinking about your future. You're thinking about, you start researching the safest things, what you can and can't eat. And a lot of people, they get their head in the game very quickly and they get very attached. So it's understandable when that devastation comes across if something goes awry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's the very first change that you go through.
I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel hesitation. Um, I was nervous. I think worried all the time. That's
Mm.
what I remember, just being a little tiny bit panicked. But I think that's my own, anxiety coming through. But I don't remember. I think I might have thrown up once, but that was it. And the rest of it was looking to other women for reassurance, like in a very physical way, in being in an environment with women and in a small town myself at the time. And, knowing other pregnant women, knowing other women who'd had babies. And for them, it's like, whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
you're in it for the baby. Just put up with whatever suffering happens beforehand. That was how I was meant to feel, I believe, because nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody.
Really?
Hmm.
I find that really interesting because when friends now ask me about my pregnancies, I feel like it was almost like a fever dream because like you're pregnant for so long, but then once you have the baby, those memories kind of eradicate the memories of being pregnant. So they would ask me stuff about specific weeks, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like my baby slept 4 hours last night, so that's all I'm thinking about was that
Right.
I got 4 hours of sleep. So I find it interesting that that was the reaction because it kind of does naturally happen where you're like, oh no, you're fine. Like you're gonna get your baby, and then that's when the real stuff happens.
Hmm. Well, and I think it's because it was farm country, like life and death, it was all the same,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair to say. But you also liked your doctor.
I
I would have been
lost.
very.
Wait, you got to say that again.
You also liked your doctor though, so I imagine he would have been available for questions and things.
Oh, yeah, I think he was prepared for me. I mean, I totally got neurotic. I did. And more towards the end. And I think that's when my anxiety caught up with me. Can I tell you one little story about my pregnancy?
Mm-hmm. Please do.
Okay. Well, at that time you knew, don't change the cat litter. And the cat wasn't allowed on the bed. And because I just thought its bum will be on the bed, it could have worms could be on the bed could contaminate me, it could go somehow through my uterus and infect you, the baby. And one day I came in and the cat was on the bed and I flipped out physically and mentally. I took the corner of the queen size mattress and I threw it up and over in the air. And
Oh my
then, yeah.
gosh.
And Sam, the cat, was like, "Holy smokes, like lady!" And then I just sat there and burst into tears and called the doctor immediately because I thought I had contaminated the baby by having this cat sleeping on the bed. Yep,
Aww.
yep, yep. I
Poor
was
little Mimi.
I was a little insane. No, I was a lot insane. I have to say, I was a lot insane.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you might have inherited some of that.
uh I see I don't remember having moments like that. I don't have like a funny cuz about uh 3/4 of for both
Say that
pregnant.
again. You're cutting out again.
Ugh, this sucks. Editing this is going to be a pain in the ass because it's
Yes.
both of us. I
Yeah.
wonder if it's because I'm recording. Anyway, um, yeah. So I didn't have any moments like that I remember. I'm sure if I asked my partner, he could probably give you a list, but I don't remember having any big panics or big freakouts or anything like that. I think the most devastating part of when I was pregnant, which happened about 3/4 of the way through, was that I found out that I had gestational diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And then with my second, it showed up a quarter of the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my biggest fears in life before getting pregnant was needles. And suddenly I was doing the finger pricks 4 times a day, and I had to give 3 needles throughout the day of insulin. So that was my big, like, oh, I can't stand this.
But it was
Like, I think,
interesting because when you said that you had it, um, you were fully prepared to do whatever it took, to make sure that the pregnancy was good, like to make sure that
mhm,
she was safe.
yeah, and I got very blessed because I have a friend in the field that was
In the
that
needle
had a lot of
field?
samples in the
And
needle field. She works with pharmacists, and she worked on like diabetic programs. So she had a lot of samples of like machines, that like blood sugar machines, and all the needles and things like that, which made a huge difference. And being in Canada, the dietitian that I saw had samples of the insulin that I needed and had enough to carry me through my pregnancy. I think I only had to buy insulin over the counter once, and that cost an arm and a leg to actually purchase it. So that was another thing that I wasn't anticipating, was the price of these things that you have to do,
mm-hmm.
that you don't have a choice. And I think in Canada we get a little pampered, and our expectations are a little high with things like that because we do have covered healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do have to pay for anything in the healthcare field, it's a little shocking, like medications that aren't covered, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that I wasn't anticipating at all.
Um, Also, it was something that you had to do some more resting, didn't you? You didn't have to have bed
Yeah.
rest.
No, I didn't have to have bed rest, but I did have I can't remember like the actual, it's pelvic girdle syndrome or something like that. And basically there's a hormone that you release when you're pregnant that loosens up your joints and your muscles. And it had loosened, and I apologize for any men listening to this. It had loosened the muscles in my pelvis. So the two bones were grinding as I was moving. So there was times my partner would come into the bedroom and I was sobbing trying to put my pants on because I was in so much pain trying to lift one leg and then lift the other. So that was, I think, worse for me than the gestational diabetes, because that was actual physical pain, and that resulted in a lot of couch time, because I like the idea of getting up would just make me cry.
Mm.
And I would say that was more towards the end, I think the last 10 weeks or so. But
Mm-hmm.
I with my second, it started really early on because my body was like, "Oh, we're doing this again. Okay, so these split." And like it just went into a natural state of, "Oh, you don't want your pelvis together? Cool. I'll relax it for you."
Okay, I got one.
You got one?
I got one.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so I had a denim tent dress. It was like a jumper. It had straps, and it was this big, huge blue tent that I wore when I was at the end of my pregnancy, toward the end of the pregnancy. And I would wear this oversized t-shirt and no underwear. By the time I got home, it was like, ugh. And I started getting unusually itchy, and it was all focused in my legs. And I would sit there and scratch my legs all the time. It just seemed like it was getting out of control. And it turned out to be the rash of pregnancy. But that came as a different diagnosis from what I was about to freak out from. One day I was in the shower, and because you have the belly, you can't always see the top of your legs. But when I looked at the top of my legs, they were blue. And I thought I had developed some kind of gangrene or some kind of circulation issue. And I was apoplectic. I was just out of it. I was screaming. Your dad came running up. I'm like, look, my legs are blue. What's happening to me? And, he was a little bit taken aback because he thought like that they were really blue. And until I put the blue denim jumper back on, I didn't realize I was scratching the denim into my legs when I was scratching.
So it was just dye from your clothes.
It was dye from my blue jeans, which is, yep. But the rash didn't go away. The itchiness didn't go away. And that, I had no idea what that was. And I finally, I didn't finally, of course, I was at the doctor's office the next morning. What is this? I'm scratching. And he said, it's the rash of pregnancy. And he says, some women get it. It's when your hormones can't keep up with your liver and the stuff is flip-flopping with your hormones. And he said, take Benadryl. I'm like, I can't take Benadryl. That's a drug. I can't do that. I wouldn't even take Tylenol. And he said, no, you're going to need to take it because it's an antihistamine. And your whole, at that point, my whole body was itchy. I was scratching my arms. I was scratching my legs. I was huge. I was uncomfortable. And he said, no, it was about 1 month left in the pregnancy. So I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And he said, just try it. And I'd get a little relief from the itchiness, but it would put me to sleep. And I think I slept through 3/4 of that month before you were born because I had zero energy. I was scratching if I was awake and then trying to take enough Benadryl to calm it. And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good for her. Or, I didn't know you were a girl at the time, but I thought, oh my gosh.
That's why I'm so chill.
Yeah. And the hip thing, I had the opposite. He was checking my hips and he said, you're going to have to go for an x-ray. And I'm like, I can't get an x-ray. I'm pregnant. And he said, you're far enough along. It was like 2 weeks, I'm itchy. And then he's telling me to go get an x-ray. And I'm like, okay, because this is the 80s. They didn't have, ultrasound at these small town hospitals yet. And he said, okay, I want you to go and get it checked. So I did. And he wanted to see if my hips were opening enough for me to have you naturally. And the neatest thing is a baby in utero just before it's delivered in an x-ray, because you see the little arms and legs and fingers and toes and 2 sets of teeth, because you're born with your baby teeth and your adult teeth behind them. And it shows up in an x-ray. It was so cool. But then again, I
two very different reactions happening to that. You're saying it's so cool, and I'm like, oh, creepy.
It is creepy. But it was neat to see it. And I was always, after that, very sorry I didn't ask for a copy of the x-ray, because I thought that would be really cool to show you when you got older. But at the time, I was just the worst mother in the world. Like, I was so guilt-ridden for taking drugs and having an x-ray, and the doctor's like, sorry, but we need to interfere medically because we don't know if you can give birth. And so one hip didn't open up enough or flex enough to naturally, but you were born naturally.
So on that, did you get drugs during childbirth? Because I find this really interesting. I think that one of the things that I was so anxious about was the epidural. And I've now had it twice. And I always want to talk to people about the epidural.
Yeah, I didn't get an epidural. No. So there's one person who can administer, the anesthesiologist, who can administer any kind of drug, like... Yeah. So I was in a really weird state. I don't know if you want me to go through all this, but it was pretty funny.
I do. Now. Okay. So here's my caveat to anyone listening. I think going through childbirth is a badge of honor. I don't care how that baby got out. Whether it was like natural C-section, in a pool, in a tub, in a car, I want to hear it. I think it's a badge of honor. I think that we should be stopping each other on the street saying, "Tell me about your battle story." Because it's genuinely incredible what we put our bodies through to get little humans out here in this world. And if we didn't do it, we wouldn't have any little humans. So I think anybody who has a little human that got that little human out of their person should be screaming from the rooftops how it happened. I want deets. I want down and dirty. Anytime someone has a baby, I'm like, okay, start with minute 1. And
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
care if it was a 16-hour labor. I want minute by minute details. Now, I'm sure those of you guys listening are probably screaming like, no, 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 don't do it. Because between us, we have a few hours of birth stories. But I
I
am
think
really
everybody
curious.
does. Yeah.
But
Okay.
I'm also the type of person that is such like a control freak. Like throughout the entire time I was pregnant, I was watching YouTubers giving birth because it's so there's so many different things that can happen. And I have to be prepared for any situation. So I was anytime like my YouTube feed was just birth, 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 birth because I was like any way that I want to know what that's going to be like. So I'm a little different in that sense. Most people are like, don't talk about it. You're humans here. It's fine. But we're going to talk about it. Tell me your story, please. Full details.
Okay, so I'm on Benadryl and I'm thinking I'm going into labor. It's the evening and it's a small town. I call my doctor and he says, get up to the hospital and we'll check you. So I get up there. I tell him my doctor's on his way, which I mean, there's one stoplight in the town. Like it's small. It's like you're 5 minutes away from everything in a car, uh, or less. So we got there, waited for the doctor. He came in, he checked me, he says, you're not dilated. Well, I had been dilated 1 centimeter for the whole week, or 2 centimeters. I don't remember, but it wasn't enough to put me into labor, and I hadn't lost my plug. So um,
Ooh.
he said, you might as well stay here because you're going to have the baby tomorrow. Just have a good night's rest and stay here. And your dad said, oh, good. I have time to finish making the Martin house that he was building in the garage for
For
the
bird.
cottage. Yep, Martin house. Yep.
For
It
birds.
was,
It was a
yep,
birdhouse.
yep, yep. And it was more like an apartment complex, but he was right into it. And, my pregnancy and giving birth was getting in the way, apparently. So he had the night off. And I stayed in the hospital, and nobody sleeps in a hospital unless you're drugged. And so early in the morning, they checked and they broke my water with knitting needles, like big oversized knitting needles. And
Mm-hmm.
I got a nurse who had just traveled down to South America. She had been in Cartagena and she had the shortest hair, but she had one little, the beads and the braid. She had one
Mm-hmm.
little tiny one behind her ear. And she was tanned and happy. And she's like, woohoo, Cartagena. And I couldn't get 3 words out of my head. It became like a mantra. Okay, water's broken. No cramps, nothing yet. And my brain on
Mm-hmm.
Benadryl is saying, Benadryl, Demerol, Cartagena, Benadryl, Demerol, Cartagena. And it was this weird little psychic trance that I couldn't get anesthetic. I knew I wouldn't be able to get it because she was off that day. So they said, we can give you Demerol, which takes away the intensity at the very height of your contraction. But you feel the buildup, then nothing, and then you feel the fall off. So that's what I got.
Oh, my stomach just contracted for you.
Well, yeah. Okay. So as the as I started feeling labor, and again, it was an 8-hour day. It started 9 to 5. Basically, once the cramps started, they increased, and they didn't want to give me more Demerol because Demerol's not good for you, the baby, right? That it
Mm-hmm.
just, you wake up and you're born stoned, I think. So they cut it back quite a bit, and I remember yelling at a nurse who came in to visit. Your dad was on the radio, so we had people calling because they were saying, yeah, Dawn's about to have a baby on the air. So we got phone calls at the hospital and they were putting them through. And we're like, I can't talk, duh, 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 because people are saying, hey, have you had the baby yet? And I'm like, you don't know me. Like, don't do this. So one of the nurses
That's what
was,
happens when you marry a local celebrity.
well, yeah, local celebrity, whatever. He was the weatherman. Was he the weatherman then? No, not yet. I don't. Yeah, yes, he was. He was the weatherman. So I just remember getting phone calls and then, asking them, your dad finally to tell them not to put calls through because I couldn't talk anymore, and he wasn't going to talk to anybody. He was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here. And a friend of his came in, a friend of ours, a nurse who worked in the hospital. She just stood in the doorway and said, hey, how's it going? And I looked at your dad, and I don't know what came over me, but I just looked at him and I said, tell her to get the F out of here right now. And it was this evil freak came out. It was like I was possessed suddenly by this demon, mean girl. But she totally, I mean, I felt horrible when everything was said and done because I realized I had said that to her, but I was just like in this state of, and it came out on her. So I felt very bad. But when it came to the labor, they just said, you're fully dilated. And they were taking me from the labor room to the birthing room, which was basically, an operating room. And, now you just stay in the same bed and they do everything all in one place. But at the time they moved you and, they're adjusting the mirror, and suddenly I felt nothing, like no pain, nothing. And I said, I'm not feeling anything. I don't feel anything. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. But I was like, at that point, quite panicked. And they were adjusting the mirror, and I'm like looking everywhere but the mirror. I didn't even see it. Like you were born, I didn't see you.
Hold on. They put a mirror up so you could see,
Yeah,
like, front row,
yeah.
everything
Well,
that was happening.
it's kind of across the room and it's concave or convex, I guess. And so you're not seeing straight, down. It's not like they're holding it up right above your head. It's quite a ways away. But, it's to give you an indication, hey, here's what's happening. So, it was actually very textbook as far as a birth goes. As soon as you were born, the itching stopped. And yeah, that was weird. But I still felt rather stoned from the Demerol, the Benadryl, and the Cartagena afterwards. And you slept a lot. So they kept saying, oh, she's a sleepy baby. I'm like, no, she's stoned and it's my fault. I made my baby on drugs.
I mean, I probably enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, you haven't woken up since.
No, still sleepy.
Yep, Demerol, Benadryl, Cartagena.
And now, do you remember how many pushes you did? Because that's a big thing now.
It was not that bad. Oh, I have to back up because the reason I was thinking Cartagena was because she was in the room a lot and she just spent the whole time talking to your dad about her vacation. And at one point she sat on the bed, and these are metal beds, right, in the hospital. And she was like swinging her legs and banging against the metal rhythmically. And it wasn't in the same rhythm as my contractions. So I'm like, Benadryl, Demerol, Cartagena. Like that was, and I had music with me, which I never played. I brought all the things, and yeah, none of that mattered. When you're in labor, you're just like, grr, you're like down there in your brain. You're just like fighting off the pain and trying to breathe your way through it. So Yeah, it wasn't fully natural childbirth, I guess, because I felt the whole lead up and then the whole taper off of each contraction.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then yeah. Sorry, did you ask a question?
I honestly can't remember. I've just been enjoying the story.
Well, yeah, it was funny at the time. I mean, no, it was not funny at the time. Afterwards, it was hilarious.
Mhm.
But also there was problems after you were born for me, but we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, that's pretty gory. We'll see what the reaction is, and then we'll see if people want the gore.
Well, you know what? I was going to tell you because there is a thing. Sutures at that time were being phased into more of a man-made material, what they sew you up with.
Hmm.
And in this small town, they still used what they call cat gut. Now, cat gut is not made from cat's intestines. It's made from cow, hog, mule, donkey, and horse intestines.
I
And it's
just
still,
threw up in my mouth a little.
yep. And they still use it in emerging countries. I mean, you don't know, but it's a natural material to hold you together and heal naturally. And my
Hmm.
body was like, none of that. No, get that stuff out of me. So my stitches
Yeah,
fell out. And that's all.
before you were healed.
Before I was healed, so I had to go back in the hospital and they
Get
took your the
restitched.
yes, that was traumatic because I
Hmm.
didn't feel like I was actually drugged enough and I felt those stitches going in. So yeah. Yeah, they make you a lot more comfortable now by numbing you, with plenty of time
Hmm.
for the numbness to take over. And at that time I wasn't sitting there going Benadryl, Demerol, Cartagena. I was like,
Yeah, that would
yeah.
be very painful.
Yeah, and then when the whatever freezing was in there, which didn't seem to be enough, by a couple hours later, I was calling the neighbor who is a nursing assistant and works in a doctor's office, and she came and made me the sweetest, strongest cup of tea and gave me two Tylenol, and it was the best thing because your Oma, my mom, had been there afterwards and was with us. And when I went to the doctor for a checkup, he says, "What's wrong with you? Like, how did you not know?" And I'm like, "I don't have a mirror down there. I don't know what's going on." He's like, "Oh my gosh, I got to get you back up to the hospital." So, and unfortunately, that was your last, my mom, your Oma's last day at our house. So she had to leave after I got out of the hospital and, left you and me at home. And you were good. You slept the whole time. You were such a good baby. One of the nurses picked you up and toured you through the hospital. I'm like, yeah, that shouldn't, yeah, this baby's going to die because of all the germs and the drugs I'm subjecting her to. Yeah,
And
just take her
yet,
around to sick
here
people,
she
show her
is.
off.
That's a thing though. Whenever someone sees a baby, and I think especially in a hospital because they see so much sadness, that when they see a new baby, it's like everyone just peps up.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's usually that's why they separate that area from everybody else in the hospital.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. Okay, so um you you once you were regulated, you seem to be going into like a really normal, it's going to happen, and you had a lot of doctors and people looking after you in Timmins at the time, but you were an hour and a half away from the hospital. So there
Mm.
was some worry about you not getting there in time.
So what happened with us is because of the gestational diabetes, it's a really tricky balance. They can't let you go too far, like too close to your due date because there is a chance of fatality if
Mm.
they let you go too far, and they don't want to go too early because medically gestational diabetes sometimes aren't as meaty as other babies because they're getting I can't remember how they explained it, but they're getting like less sugars, so they don't beef up as much, and they're also sometimes the lungs can be underdeveloped. So they want you to hit a certain milestone, but they don't want you to go too far. Like I
Mm.
think 39 weeks is the max that they'll let you go. So I was scheduled for an induction, and I went for my regular meeting with my OB on a Wednesday. And we had scheduled the induction for Monday because she was going on vacation for the weekend. She said, take the weekend, get everything ready that you need to get done, and then on Monday, be here bright and early. So we were like, okay, we'll get a hotel room for the weekend. We'll kind of like, the hotel had a pool, and it was mid-January, very far northern Ontario, very cold. So we were like, hey, we'll go swimming. Everything's going to be great. Have a little baby moon. And then as I was in the office with her, she was like, and I had looked
Wait,
this
wait, wait. You
up.
just totally faded. I was in
So
the office and she said, or she looked at you.
yeah, she looked at me and she said, do you want me to do a sweep? Which is where they stretch and sweep your cervix. And sometimes that starts contractions and things. Like, it kind of gets the ball rolling. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But she was like, I can do it now so that if you have a few contractions, everything will be good to go for Monday. It might be a little easier. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. And then she goes, something
And
can
in the
kickstart
movie
labor.
version of this, in the movie version, somebody is saying, no, say no, don't do it.
And in the real life version, Rory was sitting in the corner saying, no, what are you doing? Because he owned a lodge, a hunting and fishing lodge, and at the time had 21 guys that were working in a mine close by, and he was feeding them in shifts. So he would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do breakfast, and his parents were there helping out at the time because I was so close to having the baby. And so he had done the breakfast, and they were going to do the dinner shift. And while we were in Timmins, Rory was supposed to get food for the week for 21 guys and also the family. So there's a lot of food that he has to pick up. And he was going to do the grocery shopping after this meeting. And I had to go for a test where they monitor. Basically, you just lay there. They monitor the heart rate and make sure that everything's still okay with the baby. And it's like 15-20 minutes long. So she's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do the stretch and sweep. It might kickstart labor, but probably not. You're still very early. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Rory, eyes big as saucers. What are you doing? I still have stuff to do. Why? And he didn't say anything because he's like, okay, this is lady business. I'm not going to say anything. And we leave the office, and he's like, mouth is still hanging on the floor going, what have you done? And I was like, nothing's going to happen. And he's like, it's you. Something's going to happen. Because I don't have the greatest luck in the world. So we carry on with our day. He goes to do the groceries and things like that. And then to Walmart, and I said, hang on one sec, I have to go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom.
Hang on, you're
and I'm like,
fading,
ooh.
fading. I go to the bathroom.
So I go to the bathroom. There's a little bit of blood, which she said was normal. And I'm kind of like, oh, I'm going to keep an eye on that. And I decided to go get, because we're an hour and a half away from home, I don't have anything. I was like, I should go get some like pants, underwear, stuff like that, just in case. So after that, I go for my test where they listen to the heart rate, and I'm looking at it because they also monitor uterus movement, also known as contractions. And I'm looking at it, and that line is usually very steady. Nothing ever happens in that line. If the baby kicks, it kind of spikes a little, and then it would just go back to normal. And I'm looking at it, and it's got like a good wave going. And I'm like, that's interesting. That's new. And the nurse comes out, and she's a nursing assistant. She's in training. This is a teaching hospital. And I tell her, I say, I don't usually have movement on the line normal. And she's like, oh, let me check it out. And at this point, it's 1:15. My doctor has gone on vacation at noon. So she's not in the office. And they call her to ask her what she wants to do. She's not there. And so they go to the on-call OB, who I've never met. And she says, since you're an hour and a half away, why don't you hang out here for a couple more hours and then come back and we'll see if anything has changed. And then I had two people, because the nurse assistant did it once and then the doctor did it, where they check to see how far along you are. And basically they go knuckle deep and then they open their fingers.
Ugh.
And it's very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. So I've now had three people. I've had my OB, the nurse assistant, and the actual on-call OB have now checked my cervix. Is that
okay? Wait, we lost the cervix. Have now stretched my cervix.
Where were we?
Now the third person.
Yeah,
this is the third person.
This is the third person now stretching, and Rory's like, "Is that gonna send you into labor?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." So we go. We make some phone calls, go back to the hospital, and they put me back on the machines. They check everything again, and now the waves are going kind of crazy, a little haywire. And this is, what time was this? Probably around like 4:30, I would say. And it's going a little haywire. They leave me on it for about 25 minutes because they're like, we're not sure. We want to be really sure. Then they come back in for two more checks and they're like, oh, yeah, you're dilated. These are contractions. You're in labor right now. And I'm like, what do I do? So both of us are on the phone. I'm calling you saying, get on a plane, get here now. I'm having this baby. And I'm under the impression that like first babies take hours and hours and hours. And then the OB comes in and she's like, I don't think it's going to take this long. Like you're already at 4 centimeters and we only have to get to 10. And she's like, and your contractions are pretty steady. And I'm feeling nothing. Like, I'm like, no, I'm not feeling any kick. Like, there's no contracting happening. This isn't real. You guys are just overreacting. It's fine. And Rory's on the phone with his parents because he's got a week's worth of food for 25 people in his truck. And he's like, I can't let this sit here for days. What am I supposed to do? So he and his dad decide they're both going to drive 45 minutes and meet each other, transfer the food from truck to truck, and then he would return to the hospital and also, bring all the stuff that I need, because that was the other thing. Everyone was telling me to bring my hospital bag, and I'm like, I've brought my hospital bag to Timmins for the last 6 weeks. I'm not bringing it today. I'm not going into labor. Rory convinced me to still pack something. So I had like a quarter of the hospital bag that I had packed. I had like shampoo but no conditioner. I had like underwear but no bras. I had like a pair of pants. It was a mess. And like the baby bag was packed. Baby had everything she needed. Me, not so much. So then you flew to Timmins. You booked a flight pretty quickly. I remember at one point they were trying to set up the IV and you called me and said something about socks and then hung up. Remember that? Someone was at the house with you. You had a friend over and Leanne, you were trying to pack the bag. Yeah, you were trying to pack your bag to go to Timmins.
Right. We were having a dinner and then you called and it was like, okay, here, eat this. I got to go. And they were helping me. They helped me. They got me to the airport. They helped me pack my bag. But yeah, socks, whatever.
Yeah, you called me and you're like, I don't know what to pack. All I have is socks. And I was like, well, more than that, I got to go. And yeah, so Rory got back to the hospital around 9. And that's when the anesthesiologist came in and he was like, do you want an epidural? And I was like, I think so. I don't know what I want. I've been going back and forth in this in my mind for months and months and months. And at that point, I was 6 centimeters dilated. And I said to the OB, I'm still not feeling anything at all. So do I really need an epidural? And she goes, it doesn't get better from here. That's all I'm going to say. Not going to get better. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll get the epidural. So having not felt any labor contractions and then getting the epidural was very strange. My BP instantly went up, but I have to say getting the epidural was not as frightening as I thought it was going to be, because when it's happening to you, you don't, like, they numb the area so well. There is a little bit of a crunch when it goes in, which is kind of gross. But other than that, there is no pain. He told me he was pressing on the spot with his thumbnail. He was like, "Okay, I'm going to mark the spot with my thumbnail," which I was like, "Okay, that makes sense, because that's what I do to mosquito bites." Out of my mind. I have no idea what I was thinking. You know, when you get a mosquito bite and to take away the itch, you make an X with your nail? That's what I thought he was doing. But no, he was putting the actual needle in. He was just distracting me. He was wonderful. I loved him. He had all the good drugs. And so after my OB was the only OB on call. And she ended up, there's 6 of us in labor. 5 of the other women ended up having emergency C-sections. And it was one after the other after the other. So I didn't even see the OB. It was me and my night nurse. We were like 2 peas in a pod, just having a time. And the epidural wore off around midnight. And I was 8 or 9 centimeters dilated. And I felt everything. And I was miserable, absolutely miserable. And my nurse had tapped out the extra epidural that she could give me. And at that point, Rory was sleeping because he had been up since 5 a.m. And she was leaning over me and whispering sweet nothings in my ear. And I was like, I'm going to marry this woman. She is my soulmate. She is the calmest human being. She's in my ear going, you can do this. You're the best. Your body was built for this. There is nothing that can stop you from having this baby. This pain is in your head. And I was like, yes, say more. Say more.
Cartagena, Benadryl, Demerol.
And so she's in my ear saying all these things. And then finally, an hour and a half later, she called down to the surgery room at least 4 times to remind the anesthesiologist not to leave, because he had to see me before he went. And he came back up and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm feeling things and I don't want to. Like, I'm a millennial. We don't do feelings like this. I need to like push this all back down. So he upped the dosage, and when he did, all I remember was I was texting my friend Jody, and it was like 1:30 in the morning. And my nurse was like, okay, you have the meds now. You need to get some sleep. And I was like, I'm wide awake now. I don't feel anything. This is amazing. And at 3:05 a.m., my OB and her teaching assistant that she had came in, and they said, we're finally done all of our surgeries. And they were like, we're going to get some sleep. How are you doing? And I was like, I'm great. I'm fantastic. This is easy. I could do this all night. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to get some shut-eye. Wake us if you need to. And I was like, all right, see ya. Have a great sleep. 3:15. I called the nurse in and I'm like, I'm pushing. And she's like, no, you're not. And I was like, no, I'm pushing. Like, my whole body was lurching downward. And I was like, I'm pushing here. And she's like, you don't know how to push. You're not pushing. And then she checked and she's like, oh, no, okay. Yeah, you are. All right. And so we wake up Rory. He's beside, like, holding my hand, being like, you can do this. Everything's great. Don't worry about it. And the nurse is getting gloves on, and I'm literally sitting there going, I'm pushing. And she's telling me not to. And that hurts more than anything I've ever experienced, because my whole body is trying to contract downward and she's telling me not to. So I'm like trying to fight internally these contractions. And I'm like, this is impossible. This hurts so much. So finally she's like, whatever, just push. And she hasn't taught me at this point, like, the way she wants me to do it. So I'm just kind of like a fish in the bed. Just, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, you said I could push? Cool. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And then she finally gets ready and she's like, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to actually push. And she's like, sometimes this can take a long time. It's, it could be a while. So we're going to try to, like, I'm going to teach you how to do it. We'll do a practice one. We'll do a few. And then we'll, once we're closer to her coming, we'll wake the OB. And I'm like, all right. So she teaches me the practice way to do it, how she wants me to do it. I do one for real. And she's like, and there's your baby's head. Rory, would you be a dear and press that red button on the wall? And he's like, okay. And I didn't realize this, but his part of the story is that she gave him like, oh my God, eyes. Like, this baby is coming right now. Press the button with all your might. And he presses it. Nothing happens. She's like, Rory, be a dear, run around the bed. There's a string over there. Pull that string. He flies around the bed, pulls the string, nothing happens. She's like, I'm going to step away for a moment and I'm going to go get the OB. She's like, if you feel the need, you just keep pushing. And I'm like, what? Like, there's no one here. And you just said, like, she was like, oh, Rory, come see the baby's head. It's, oh, your baby has lots of hair. And then she's stepping away. I was like, no, you come back here. But what I didn't realize is she was trying to call the OBs and the calls weren't going through. So the OBs weren't waking up. And so she rushes to go get them, wakes them up. They come rushing in and she's like, so we're having a baby. And I look at her and I had done 2 pushes when she wasn't there. And I was like, yeah, like right now. And she looks down, she sits, and then her arms fly up and she catches my baby midair.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. I like to joke that Cameron came out like a wrecking ball because did she ever, like, flew. And I remember in that moment thinking, I didn't know that they're supposed to go up because every movie I had seen, you don't see that much, right? Like, the doctors put their arms out, the baby kind of slowly slides into the arms, and it's like, here's your baby. I've never seen one catch one over the shoulder like that. So that was my story. Wow. And then we had called you, so I could hear you. And I knew that you were there, and she was like, hey, it's time to do the stitches. And then this is the other funny beat that I want to hit, is that they had to put my baby on me because as she was trying to do the stitches, my epidural was wearing off. So I was slowly scooching further and further up the bed, like away from her and the needle. And finally she was like, put the baby on the mom. And that was the only thing that kept me still so that she could finish up with the stitches. So that's my battle story for number 1. Number 2 is a little more traumatic, but.
Well, we'll go there next.
Yeah. And then you came in and you saw the baby.
Yep. And they said, look, she's a redhead. And we all went, what?
Yeah. I was like, no, she's not. No, not at all. And she was like, no, she is. And I remember my nurse, this is the last thing that I'll say about this, because this is like a PSA to any expecting mother. So they transferred me to my overnight room where we were going to be staying for the next couple days. And as she dropped me off, her shift was ending. And she said, whatever you do, whatever questions you have to stop them and ask, because they don't offer extra information. And they're so used to doing their job and they're on such a tight schedule. Like, so many nurses are pulled so thin that she was like, unless you stop them and you ask your questions, you're not going to get an answer. They're not going to just offer the information because they don't know what you do and do not know. And that I thought was really valuable. I thought that I tell that to anyone that tells me they're expecting, is that like, you have to stop people and ask your questions. And also take everything you can from that hospital room. Everything. And even the numbing cream that sometimes they give you, if you tell them that you've used it all in a day, they will then turn around and say you're only supposed to use a pea-sized amount and the bottle we gave you is supposed to last a week. So just, chuck it in your purse and tell them you used it all.
Right.
That's for
Okay.
Canadian hospitals. I don't know if American hospitals you can steal stuff, but Canadian hospitals, I encourage it.
We'd like to thank the doctors and nurses that helped us go through these life-changing events, because without doctors and nurses, some of us wouldn't even be here. So so this episode was sponsored by Demerol, Benadryl, and Cartagena.
You gotta stop at the sponsor. Nobody's sponsoring us.
Well, they
but
should.
Benadryl should sponsor us. I'd like that. Spring is coming.
How about this episode was sponsored by Lime Cordial?
Not lemon anything.
Okay. Well, we'll finish this discussion on our next episode. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have stories or incidents or things that you want to, let us know about, we're open to hearing that. We'd love to hear other people's stories. And if it's really good and you and your mom have a story, we'll bring you on the episode with us one day.
Yeah.
That would be
like
fun.
That. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's just turn this whole podcasting thing into just birth stories.
No.
That would be my dream.
Wrong.
Everyone is just screaming at their devices right now. No, God.
No, we have to have a wine episode and so much more than birth. Anyway, I will see you next week then. Love you and mean it.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.